Okay. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have heard the military and the security forces just before this. What I'm going to be talking about is slightly different. It has to do with applications for non-military use, which in some cases can benefit by the military, but in other cases it's going to be the other way around. Now, let me see if this works. We can forget that, that's who we are. So we're an association now federating 32 national associations. We're involved with all the rulemaking activities going on in Europe, as well as ICAO level, which is international level. You can read that afterwards. These are the associations that we federate. As you can see, the Portuguese association, APANT, is part of this. And they're doing very constructive work, but I'll come back to that later. In total, these companies now represent close to 5,000 companies in the world that are all involved in the RPAS sector, in the unmanned aircraft sector. How many Portuguese companies are in here? It's not even 1%. So I'm happy to hear that we in Portugal are winning tenders and that we have a thriving industry, but they don't seem to be really involved with what we're doing on the rulemaking side. But again, we'll come to that later. Here are the countries in Europe with a rule or regulation in place. And yes, Portugal is indicated. But if you compare what is called the regulation in Portugal, which is not really a regulation, it is more like a rule, it's really soft regulation, it's a first step, it's a micro step. We have to go further. But what this highlights is that we have a significant number of countries in Europe with national rules or regulations. Now, is that beneficial to industry? No, it is not. We cannot have a pilot license issued in one country, accepted in another country. An operator, an aerial work operator, approved in one country, cannot automatically do the same type of operation in another country. And Europe is based on the free flow of services and products. So this has to change. At the moment, look at this, 12,573 certificated operators in Europe. An operator is a company deploying unmanned aircraft with pilots for commercial work. Over 12,000. How many have we got in Portugal? I don't think anybody can tell me. But I would like to know if there's somebody in the audience who can tell me how many we have, because I have put down 40 as an estimate. I'm not sure that is correct. It can be higher, it can be lower. Now, if you look at this thing here, we see that we have, out of the 30 countries that we're covering in Europe, so that's the European Union countries, including UK for the moment, plus Switzerland and Norway, all of them are ICAO members. 26 are JERIS members. We have 22 national associations in those 30 countries. We have 27 countries with rules or regulations in place, all separate, all different. We have updates coming on the regulations in 6 countries. and we have rules in place, so that is not yet a regulation, in 3. So all of this shows that we still have quite a distance to go. All those operators, those certificated operators, are principally flying in visual line of sight with their aircraft. In principle, that means flights below 500 feet above ground level and at a distance, a horizontal distance between the pilot and the aircraft, also restricted to 500 meters. So we're not flying beyond that yet. There are exceptions in a number of countries, but in most cases, this is still being done on an exception basis, not automatic. This is just a little overview on aircraft in general, and you'll see that every single type of aircraft, as we know it, now exists also as an RPAS. So this is really branching out. It's very wide. It's covering all areas of aviation. And like was said earlier by the speakers before me, this is just the beginning. It is not going to stop. Now there we have the smallest operational RPAS in the world at the moment. That is 17 grams. It's the size of a pack of cigarettes. It has been produced in several thousands of units. It has been operationally deployed and is still operationally deployed in a number of countries all around the world. And it started with deployment by the UK Armed Forces, the Army and Special Services in Afghanistan. 17 grams. And then at the bottom, we have the biggest one. This thing is over 15 tons. Now that was a bit of a miscalculation, this Eurohawk thing. It was bought by Germany. It was supposed to be flying in German airspace, and it was only after the purchase that the forces came to the conclusion that it was not going to be able to fly in German airspace. So 500 million down the drain. Now we're going to flip through this rather quickly. I've got a few slides up here just to show you the various different configurations that you have in RPAS. Everything that you can imagine is flying and exists. They come from very strange countries, some countries that are not known as aviation countries at all. That tiny thing that I showed you, the Black Hornet, that is made in Norway. Well, is anybody aware of aircraft being produced in Norway? No. But look here, you've got Estonia, you've got a number in France, and of course you've got DJI, Austria, Slovenia, and it keeps on going. Some of these are really strange, have very specific applications. The cryo-wing in Norway is being used above the Arctic Circle. And guess what? There's no GPS coverage up there. So they had to solve that problem. And this is being used for meteorological services and for environmental evaluations. Here you have a few different applications that are all starting at the moment. Not all of these are mature, but they're being looked at. And it goes from the very small things in the center, where they're looking at using really tiny drones to pollinate flowers. That isn't working yet, but there are quite a few companies looking into this. Now, this is driving a whole set of technologies that are going to be required. Because when you pollinate flowers, you're not going to send out 5 or 10 of these things. It's going to be thousands. And these thousands require the algorithms so that they don't crash into each other. And that's just one of the algorithms that's required. So this is pushing the boundaries of technology that in other areas can probably also be used. The one in the left-hand corner there, it looks like a falcon. It flies like a falcon. It's a flapping wing thing. And the flight pattern of that is recognized by birds and animals on the ground as being a falcon. So they're scared away. This was developed specifically for scaring birds away from airports. And as the majority of you probably know, we're not allowed to fly drones on airports. So this was a contradiction from the first beginning of the whole concept. But they're getting there. The first major airport has signed a contract with them to use this for scaring away birds from the airport. Tethered aircraft, top right-hand corner. That is coming forward as being probably one of the most efficient ways of generating electricity, with a price of infrastructure required, which is well below windmills and wind turbines. The first contract for that has been given by a German company. Facebook, bottom left-hand corner, they're looking at populating certain parts of the world with this. These things are going to be flying at a certain altitude and are going to be used as relays. And the objective here is to connect internet users who currently are not internet users and bring them into the modern age. DHL drone, experimentation by DHL in Germany for the transport of goods. This is happening in a number of countries. Don't get your hopes up. This is still experimental. It's not going to be tomorrow that this can be done on a regular basis. Unless, of course, you want to do that in a segregated air corridor. That could be possible. And then we have the one in the right-hand corner, in the bottom. Pilotless aircraft to be used as taxis. And Sheikh Mohammed of Dubai has said that he's going to allow this. Well, maybe not tomorrow. Maybe this will take a little bit more time. But this is happening. And not only a Chinese company is doing this. There are European companies looking at this, American companies looking at this. So be aware the scope of the applicability of the technologies we're looking at is really wide. Here we have a listing of the various types of usage of RPAS. And as you can see, it's practically used already today in every applicable field. So, governmental as well as governmental, but what we're going to be talking about here this morning is principally in the bottom, non-governmental, and we're going to be concentrating on aerial work. Now, when you look at aerial work, traditionally it is split down this way. And in each of these boxes, you can fit in RPAS. So I won't spend too much time on this. You can read this afterwards. And we're not reinventing anything here. This is existing. But now, let's look at the market sectors for aerial work. If you look at these market sectors, every single type of RPAS operation classified as aerial work can be fit in. All of these have definitions behind them so that you understand what they entail. Those definitions can be found on the website indicated there. There is two specific categories that jump out, is the public safety category and the public security and law enforcement category, which would fall into governmental applications, but in some cases, some of their flights can be subcontracted to civilian operators. Now, here you have a listing of all the flight mission purposes. Everything that you can imagine, you can hang up to one of these. Now, again, a word means nothing. You need a definition for the word to understand what is behind it. You can find that on the website indicated at the bottom. But the most interesting part of this slide is what you see around it. Because the application on the top left-hand corner, it defines everything that is in white below it. Amongst the things that it defines is the payload required. The payload conditions what is below that, etc. You go to the top right-hand corner, and you go down. And you see that all of this fits into each other. And that is why it is so important to talk about a system, refer to a system, when you're talking about unmanned aircraft. It's not only about the aircraft or the airframe. Now, this is a small oversight of what is happening at European level. This is where we're going. And I encourage all of you to go to the websites that are indicated on the last page, where you will find all the documents that refer to this and where you can get all the details. But one of the main messages that I would like to bring out to Portugal here today is, guys, get involved, read, understand what is happening at European level. Stop staring at your belly. Because whatever you do on a national level is going to be wonderful, but it's not going to be in sync with what is happening in the rest of Europe. And that means that you might be throwing away money and opportunities. At the moment, I don't see any Portuguese companies involved in the rule-making activities in Brussels. Now, if that is the case, and please verify, if that is the case, how can the Portuguese industry be plugged in? It is not going to come for nothing. You have to make an effort. And if you don't make that effort, your industry is going to go nowhere. Because it's a global market out there. And our first global market is the European market. And if you're not part of the European market, in accordance with the European legislation that is going to come out in 2019, then you've already lost the first step. Now, the major thing to understand from this slide is that it is no longer based on aircraft mass, the upcoming legislation. Everything is going to be based, it's going to be operational centric instead of aircraft centric. That's where the mass goes away. And it's going to be proportionate. The regulations are going to be proportionate to the risk of the operation. The three categories that have been defined are the ones that you see up there: the open category, specific category, and certified category. None of those are really based on mass. They're all based on operation. Now, that is a very basic principle that has to be clearly understood, and the implications of that have to be understood. Now, at the bottom, you see these drones, and then drones and RPAS UAS and RPAS UAS. What does that mean? When we're talking about the open category, all that is in visual line of sight. That is with your DJI Phantoms, that is with your hobby shop equipment, but used for professional purposes. That is going to be relatively simple. And that is most probably all going to be restricted to visual line of sight operations. Below 500 feet, in some cases 400 feet, that is a national prerogative, and not far away, 500 meters horizontal, something like that. But when we get to the specific category, that is where we're going to be flying further away, not higher. It will still be below 500 feet. But now we're going to go beyond visual line of sight. And that is where there are going to be a significant number of technology challenges. There are things that have to be resolved there that we haven't got yet. And this is where there are opportunities for Portuguese industry. And a lot of these opportunities are highlighted in the notice of proposed amendment that has been published by IASA, about which a presentation will take place this afternoon by APANS. They're also highlighted in the U-Space blueprint that was recently published by CSAR. Read those documents so that you can prepare yourself for what is coming up. Now, where is the urgency? The urgency is really in the very low level, below 500 feet, beyond visual line of sight, like I just said, in non-urban and urban areas. And everything that is going to happen from now on is not going to happen in one go. It's going to be done incrementally. So it's first going to take place in non-urban areas, and the lower the population density, the easier it's going to be. There are many applications there, many possibilities, and many commercial possibilities for companies who are going to be operating RPAS. Now, in preparation for that, and within the context of the notice of proposed amendment that has just been published by IASA, the definition of standard operational scenarios is going to be of prime importance. Because in the specific category, everything is going to be based on standard operational scenarios pre-agreed on, predefined. And here again, this is going to be European-wide, which means that Portugal, the Portuguese industry, the Portuguese RPAS community, has to be involved in defining the standard operational scenarios that are specific to Portugal. If you are not involved in doing this, starting to do it now, and you only look at this after the NPA has closed and after the regulation has been put in place, industry in Portugal is going to lose. You have to step up now and defend your position now. Now, read this later. This is just an overview of what is happening, what is required, what we should be looking at. All of this is urgent. All of this has to be done. All of this has to be done on European level, not on national level. And because it has to be done on European level, it is in the interest of the Portuguese RPAS community to be involved. A lot of this can be done without traveling, without going to meetings in Brussels. It can be done by internet. It can be done by WebEx conferences. We are going to be creating working groups that will tackle these things. But Portugal has to wake up. You have to get involved with this. And by being involved, you will learn what is going on. And that's also very important, that you learn what is happening in other countries, because don't try and reinvent the wheel. Many have made mistakes already. Don't make the same mistakes. You're coming to the table rather late, which is good. It means that you can avoid making many of the mistakes that others have made. Now, the efforts that are required are in the areas here where you see red arrows. That is where everything is required. Now, I was really surprised to hear that there was discussion in Portugal about insurance. I don't understand. Insurance is covered. It's there. The regulations say what is required and what you have to respect. The only thing what isn't really clear is when you are looking at recreational drones, so your DJI Phantom that you buy in the supermarket, when you fly that on the beach or in a park, is it covered? Are you covered for third-party liability in Portugal by your homeowner's insurance policy? That is something you have to check. It means that it wouldn't cost you anything, but that you are covered. Now, this is the case in quite a few European countries. So why wouldn't it be the case in Portugal? Try and find that out. As far as professional applications of drones, irrespective of the size, there's a European directive that you fall under. A professional drone is an aircraft. Your minimum liability, third-party liability, is 1 million euros. That's what you have to take out as a minimum. And there are policies for that. It doesn't have to be expensive. The normal rate at the moment for the types of operations that can be taking place today are between 300 and 400 euro a year. Third-party liability, 1 million coverage. Now, all the others that you see here, the red arrows, are community efforts. They can only be done by the community. At the bottom, you'll see data protection and privacy and general public acceptance. Now, there are still harmonization requirements in data protection and privacy. Fortunately, some of the national data protection agencies are starting to speak to each other relative to drones, but it's still just starting. Some things have to be cleared up there. General public acceptance is a responsibility that lies on the shoulders of the entire community. We have to educate the public, we have to educate the future consumers, the future customers of the RPAS community, and this has to be done on a community level. This drone rules thing is a European Commission project dedicated to awareness creation in the areas that you see there: safety, privacy, data protection, and insurance. The first iteration of this website is online. You can go and take a look. And this has been made in such a way that even if you're not an expert, you will understand. The majority of the documents on this website are really simple. They're in 5 different languages. In some cases, the high-level documents are in 22 different languages, including Portuguese. Later this summer, under safety, you will have up there what we are calling national regulatory profiles, which is a characterization of the rules and regulations in each country, all done with the same template, which will make it possible to compare one country to the other. And then what you should do is take the Portuguese one, look at the Portuguese one, print it out, and then look at the others. And then you will see what still has to be done in Portugal. And don't think all the others have everything, no. But Portugal is really, really here, when the others are up here, and a few are up there. So that will be a simple way for you to recognize what has to be done, but also where you, as the RPAS community of Portugal, can help ANAC. Because that is also your responsibility. ANAC cannot suck this out of their thumb. They need support from the industry, from the operators, to do this, to get to the next level. And yes, that means investment in time. It means investment in personnel from the community. But if the community does not do that, the community cannot expect ANAC to make progress. So it's very important that you understand that there has to be a communication between the two and cooperation. Now, here you see the high-level objectives of this website. Really go take a look. You can add to it if you want. But now I probably come to the most important part of what I think is the most important part of the few minutes that I'm allowed to speak here. And that is, how should Portugal look at advancing? You're a relatively small country. You have a relatively small population. You have a relatively small industry. But there are still possibilities there. Now, I came here 3 years ago, and I was asked to give a presentation fairly similar to this, but also, Peter, tell Portugal what they're doing wrong. Well, I was very hard with ANAC at the time, and that has changed. They're trying to do what they can with the means they have. If you, the aviation industry, the RPAS industry of Portugal, want them to do more and to do it faster, you have to contribute. Now, the major problem that we have everywhere in the world, it's not only in Portugal, is that the development of technology is much faster than the regulator is used to. Aviation regulation is terrible. It takes years. You all think that NATO is slow? Wait until you've seen ICAO. It's the slowest organization in the world. But at the same time, why? Because those guys are looking at maintaining, if not increasing, safety in the air. And that is the prime consideration of ANAC. It's the prime consideration of the national ANSP. Now, what is happening in a number of European countries, which is really beneficial, is clipping everybody, the whole community together in something that a number of countries are calling a civil drone council. Now that means you have government entities, civil and military, users, operators, customers. You have manufacturers, you have commercial operators, you have academia, all of this together. Because the trick here is to find out how can we, with the little money that we have, do most. How can we avoid reinventing the wheel? How can we avoid throwing money into black holes that disappear and have no positive effect? Now, this is happening in France, this is happening in UK, this is happening in the Netherlands, this is happening in Spain, where the community has come together. Now, the trick is to find in Portugal a governmental entity willing to take the lead, which will be an insurance that below there will not be any competition, because you want to have all the competitors there together. So this concept, if you want to learn more about it, contact me, send me an email. You can find all that information there. It all exists. Nothing is secret. I can put you in contact with the other organizations that are doing this type of work. You can ask them questions. But something within the Portuguese way of doing things has to change. You've already shown that you can change. After 3 years ago, very good. Now take the next step. The next step is going to be very critical. You cannot wait too long to take it. Okay, that's the end. If anybody has any questions, just put up your hand. Don't be bashful. Okay? I will be outside having a cigarette. Come and ask me questions there if you want. But don't miss the opportunity to pick my brain. It's free. I don't cost anything. I'm a weirdness in Europe. Okay, thank you very much.
Excelentíssimos senhores,